Today is Friday, July 21st, 2017, and I'm in the home of Jim Walton in Camarillo, California, talking with him about his career in the United States Army. I'm Terry DeMay, and I will be interviewing Jim on behalf of the National Society Colonial Dames of the 17th Century and Kayla Chase Chapter and the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, Conejo Valley Chapter. Jim was born on September 4th, 1930, in Leedy, Oklahoma. He served as first lieutenant in the United States Army from September 1953 to June 1955. He attended Oklahoma State University's ROTC program and graduated with a degree in agronomy. This is Jim's story. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Tell me about your early life. When were you born and where?
I was born on September the 4th, 1930, if you can believe that, in western Oklahoma, farm, ranch, where the wind sweeps across the plain. It's not just a song. And there was a lot of work to be done on a farm and a ranch, so I learned how to work. And went to school there in Lee for 12 years. And graduated well as a valedictorian of the class, as a matter of fact, which is not much because there were only 25 in the class, so I didn't have much competition. But it was a tough life, but there were 4 of us kids, and we had a good time. It was before TV, and we played games, shoot the moon, rook, caroms, so somebody was always ready to play the game. Of course, I did have to, in the winter, I'd have to go down and chop the ice on the pond so the cows could drink. And you wore big old mackinaw and mittens to try to stay warm. And earmuffs, of course. In the summer, it was pretty warm. The south wind would blow, and could sleep in front of an open window, and that was pretty good, before air conditioning, of course. Or even a fan. We had no electricity for some time till we got what they called a wind charger. They call it a wind turbine now, but it gave you 6 volts of battery, which is fine for the radio and some dim lights. We were ahead of our time there. And that was the way it went. And
you attended church 3 times a week, you told me.
Oh my God, yes. At least that's a time, about at least 3 times a week for the first 40 years of my life. That's 6,000 times. And I decided that was enough.
You told me a story about having a church service in the Masonic Lodge.
Yes. At 5 years of age, we having a church services in the Masonic Lodge. And went there in the morning. On the east wall there was a stained glass window of the Masonic big old eye, and I looked up there and I thought, there's the eye. We had a song saying, there's an all-seeing eye watching you. A terrible thing to treat a 5-year-old kid. Well, they started early with their guilt trips and never stopped. No, that was enough for me.
Tell me a little bit about your parents.
Well, they were both school teachers, and my father was in World War I, and when he came back home, western Oklahoma is usually quite dry, so he saw some literature from the Tahlequah Teachers College in eastern Oklahoma. Looked great, so he went over there and studied there. And he met my mother, and there was no TV, of course, in those days, but she did have a phonograph. And oddly enough, the darn thing kept breaking down. They had to get Dad over to fix it. Anyway, they decided to get married. And she would not ask her parents. She was afraid that they would say no, and she could not go against them. But they could get married without asking them. So that's what they did. And when Dad brought Mother home to western Oklahoma and introduced her to his father, he turned around to Dad and said, "You have disgraced our family." Why? She was 1/32nd Cherokee Indian. And that was a terrible thing in those days, I guess. Anyway, she never had much to do with, it was his bad because she never had much to do with him after that. How to get along, get started with your daughter-in-law. I mean, yeah, whatever it is. A tough time.
Mm-hmm. And they were Roy and Ruth.
That's
right?
correct.
And your dad served some time in France?
Yes, he was in World War One. He was he knew how to drive, which was not common in those days. So he got to be a chauffeur, and he stayed there for the peace treaty. He would haul around the diplomats, and they would travel. And he said they would, the diplomats sometimes when they stopped for a meal, they'd invite them to sit with them, he and his assistant driver, and have good food, good French food, fine wines. I was shocked to hear that because I'd never heard that he had any alcohol at all, ever. But he had a good time.
And he took a little side trip to England?
Oh, yeah. He was the sort of person who didn't believe in regulations too much. And he had some time off, so he thought, well, I'll just go across the channel and visit England. And so he did that. And when he came back and he got off the boat, the Marine guard was there, and he said, let's see your pass. And he said, hell, I don't have one. And the guard said, go on. He didn't want to mess with anything at the end of the shift. Also, another thing he did was that during the mess hall, they would wait until there's no danger of running out of food, but they started getting rid of the food they had, so they gave them lots of food. He was disappointed in me and my brother because we were officers and gentlemen, and we didn't have a good time as he did.
Let's talk a little bit about your siblings.
All right. My brother is 7 years older than I, and he was, your typical big brother. We lived in Miami, Oklahoma for a while, and we'd go out and look for Indian arrowheads, and we'd find them. I went to school with him, although I wasn't old enough. Since my parents were both teachers, I knew how to read by the time I started school. So I would sit there, although it was too young. My father was on the school board, and he had some influence. And it was a great babysitting. So I'd go there with my older brother and my older sister. And it was interesting.
And your brother was Bob?
His name is Bob. He flew 35 missions over Germany in World War II. That means he could go home after he reached that quota and be a trainer. Thank goodness for that. And my older sister is 5 years older than I. She was like a second mother, and still is. 92 years of age, and still not as active as I am, as active as that is. And a younger daughter, born 3 years after I. We were in Miami, Oklahoma, and the doctor came out. Big deal. And we kids were sent off someplace, and we came back. We had a baby sister. Unfortunately, she died about 10 years ago, I guess. And my brother died, I think, about 8 years ago. He chose the death with dignity way of dying, since he was near death anyway. So he went with his children down to the beach to see the sunset, and they all had a drink. He had a special drink, and that was his choice. He was cremated, and his ashes put in the bay nearby. He was a great fisherman, and he loved the ocean.
And that was in Washington State?
Washington State.
And your older sister is Wanda?
That's correct.
And the younger one is Pauline?
That's right. Called her Polly.
Okay. So you graduated as valedictorian and then went on to college.
Yes, that's right. My older brother should have told me something, and that is, don't get involved with any women before you go to college and get a job. But I took up this poor girl's most of her senior year going steady. And when the time came to approaching graduation, she brought up the subject of marriage, and I said, well, I'm going to college. And she felt really, really bad about that. I felt bad about it too. Anyway, my father and I went on a business trip to Colorado that summer after graduation. And when we got back, my mother gave me the lady paper, and it had her obituary in it. I was really surprised at that. Very sad.
It is sad. So, you were in the ROTC program.
Yes, since Oklahoma State University, or Oklahoma A&M as it was at that time, was a land-grant college. That meant they had to offer compulsory Reserve Officers Training Corps to the fellows, not the girls, just the fellows. And I hated it, and I couldn't wait to get out. But about the time the 2 years was over, the Korean War broke out. So I hustled down and signed up for advanced ROTC. Better to be an officer than a grunt, I guess. And I was out of place. The agricultural boys were supposed to go as the infantry. That sounded dangerous to me, so I went down to signed up for the Signal Corps. I was out of place with them because they wanted electrical engineers, communication people, and they sent me to supply school for 5 months after the basic officers training. But I did basically nothing for the rest of my military career. But sit around the office, go to the office, come home, like that.
You're telling the whole story ahead of me.
Oh, I'm getting out of order. All right.
No, it's okay. So somewhere along the line, while you were in Oklahoma A&M, you met Virginia.
Yes, we met in church. And got married, I think, about our junior years. Had a wonderful daughter. And yes, I took accounting. I had a career out of that. The agriculture degree was not valuable to me. So we moved to Oklahoma City and went to work for a CPA accounting firm, Pete Marwick Mitchell it was called in those days. And so after that, I went to work for the Oklahoma Securities Commission. And after that, I had interviewed with the Department of Energy, Atomic Energy Commission, as it was known then. And they called and invited me to join them, so I did, thank goodness for that. And they assigned me to Los Alamos, New Mexico, where the bomb was made, of course. And not long after that, I was bumped by someone who had seniority on me, and went to LA. It was against my will, but now I'm glad they did that. If you like to hunt and fish, it's paradise for you, Los Alamos, but that's about all they have.
Yeah. So you mentioned your daughter.
Oh yeah, yes, a wonderful daughter. She's still, she's here near me, 6 miles away. Thank goodness for that.
And her name?
Sherry. Well, her name is Cheryl, but we call her Sherry.
And after Cheryl came Greg.
And Greg was born a few years after that, 5 years after that. And when Greg was ready to graduate, ready to go into college, I said, "Listen, Greg, I can help you with that." I didn't know what to do when I went to college, so I made some bad choices. However, if you I would suggest that you take accounting. You can always get a good job with accounting. So he came back the next day and said, "Okay, Dad, I've decided I'm going to be an artist." But he was giving me the business. He did study accounting, had a good career in that, as I did after changing majors twice. And then he went to work for Keebler Bakery, and his marriage failed, and accepted a transfer to North Carolina. And we didn't see him a lot after that. In fact, He died at age 48, I think, mainly from smoking, also the booze. And that was very sad.
Mm-hmm. And Cheryl married, and she's still married.
Yes, she's had some marriages as I have, but she's happily married now. And has the freedom to, she comes down at least once a week and we go out and do things.
And her husband is?
Her husband's name is, they call him Kelly. That's his last name, but that's the name he uses. He was in the Marines, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And they have 2 children? Your grandchildren?
Sherry has 2 children.
Okay.
And one of them is engaged, and the other is married and has 3 beautiful great-grandchildren. Unfortunately, they got transferred to Minnesota, unfortunate for us. Sherry goes to see them probably twice a year.
So you have a grandson, Brandon.
That's right.
And a granddaughter.
Ashley.
And her husband.
Ryan.
And their 3 children, your great-grandchildren.
Yep. Jack, Katie, and Ruby.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So now tell me a little bit about your early military career.
Well, I went to summer camp the year before graduating, after having gone to school for 5 years due to changing majors. And after that, I was ordered to active duty at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. I went to basic officers training course, and after that, 5 months supplies course. They couldn't figure out what to do with me, being an ag boy. We went to bivouac up there in New Jersey. It was the winter, and we almost froze to death. We were not adequately prepared for that. They didn't expect a lot of snow and cold. But after that, it was transferred to Fort Hood, Texas, where it was dry and hot. We went from winter to summer that year, and after that to Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Interesting place. It was built as a fort to fight the Indians, and they had huts in those days for a guide, and there may be 1 or 2 or 3 little rooms behind the hut. That was the number of wives they had. And in World War II, it was a training place for a black regiment. And they said that they had a lot of absence without leave in those days, and desertions. And they said they had a noose still hanging there waiting to catch those guys. They'd never taken it down. There'd be we had a little snow on the cactus sometimes. We were almost a mile high, about 10 miles from the Mexican border. To do our shopping, we had to go to Tucson, Arizona.
And you were discharged from Fort Huachuca in
Yes.
1955?
Yeah, they let me go early because they really had nothing for me to do.
So I have a question. What kind of auditing did the military have you doing? Was it all financial, or did you audit procedures and
Well, it was mainly financial. At Los Alamos, we audited the University of California Scientific Laboratory, the ones that built the bomb. And there was really nothing we'd look at stuff and not find anything. They'd been audited forever. And when I came to LA, I'd go to the subcontractors and see that they were not cheating the government and doing the right thing.
That's very important stuff. Very important.
Sure.
Stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And drove to California to see my aunt, meet my wife, and back to Oklahoma, stay with my parents for a while until school started. So I applied for a master's degree in accounting, and used the GI Bill to help with that. Also, my wife, Virginia, worked as a secretary for the dean of the School of Home Economics, from which she had graduated. So we made it okay until Sherry came along about a few months before I graduated. Then we went to Oklahoma City to work for a CPA firm, Pete Mitchell, that was known. And after that, am I repeating myself?
No, you're okay.
After that, went to work for the Oklahoma Securities Commission. It had some scandals there, and they needed some help. And after that, I had interviewed with the Department of Energy, the Atomic Energy Commission, they called it. And they called me to join them, so I did, and they sent me to Los Alamos, New Mexico, where the bomb was made, of course. And that was an interesting place. It was high, but it was, they had 8 feet of snow that winter. You'd have to take a broom in your car if you went out to the movies someplace to sweep the snow off your car. But it would dry up between snowstorms because it was so dry there. And about the time that spring came along, when the time was come to start exploring around there, I was transferred to Los Alamos. I was opposed to it, but now I'm glad they did. There was hunting and fishing in Los Alamos, but that's about all. They had a Hispanic fellow who wanted to come back to the home country, Española, where, of course, all the Hispanics were. There were a lot of Hispanics who worked at the base. At that time, Los Alamos had just been opened up. For years, it was a closed base. You had to have a pass to get in. But they finally decided, oh, what the heck, and they just opened it up so everybody could come in. So I was happy to be in L.A., although the smog was terrible. Your eyes would sting when you went downtown or other places. And I audited some of the subcontractors, vendors for the government, various places. And after about a couple of years, I understood that that was not a good hot job, and so I applied to an aerospace company, and they accepted me. Space Technologies, they called it. Now it's called Thompson Remo Woodridge, or TRW. And one of the companies which I had audited, the boss called me and said, I'd like for you to come, we'll talk about being our controller. I said, nah, I don't want to do that, never mind. But he kept talking, and I said, well, I'll come and talk to you. He was a terrific salesman, and before I knew it, I'd accepted that position. So I worked for them for 25 years.
That was Norman Fink.
Norman S. Fink Engineering Company.
Okay.
They called it Norman Engineering. And by that time, the boss was getting old, and he had no heir apparent. Also, he had canceled our pension plan. Well, he took the money. They determined that was legal in those days, and it happened. So I went to work for an aerospace communications company, Lincom, and I was with them for several years until they decided they needed somebody with computer skills, which I did not have, red-hot computer skills. So I retired from there at age 64, started drawing my Social Security, and we lived with that for some time.
So let me backtrack a little bit. You and Virginia, your marriage ended in about 1976, is that correct?
Yes, she moved me out in 1977, and we got divorced after about 5 years.
Okay. And you liked to square dance during those days?
I learned to square dance in 1974, and I saw a flyer in the window, and I said, that was like fun. So I told Virginia, well, let's go, and let's take the neighbors. Well, she didn't like it. She thought she was above that. She thought that was country. and we were going into the junior high school where the dance was being held, and there were some young louts said, "Oh, look at the Hicks, look at those funny dresses," and that just killed her. She said, "I can't go back." I said, "You're not going to let those kids tell you what to do." "I just can't go back," she says. So I laid out for a year or more, and I got to missing it, and I said, "I'd really like to go back to square dancing." And she said, "Go ahead." So I did, and enjoyed that for a while, and we kind of drifted apart after that. When we were seniors in college, we both took a course in marriage, and at the end of it, the instructor said, now, her name was Mrs. Marshall, she said, "Now you two, you must never get married. Don't do it." And we thought, well, what does she know? But she knew. We never got along. We were not compatible. But I hung in there for 25 years. That's what I do.
And then you met Bonnie.
Met her square dancing. Well, I got a single apartment near the place of work in Culver City, and I saw a notice for a ballroom dance the day after I moved out. So I went over there, and I was never much of a ballroom dancer, still aren't, but I made a stab at it. And when they said, "Now promenade," most people just hold their hands. That's the way they do it. Well, not me. In square dancing, in those days, you promenaded by throwing out your hands, and the girl would take your hands. And pretty soon she said, with whom I was dancing, said, "I'd like to introduce you to my friend Bonnie." So we went over there, and she gave me her pitch about square dancing, and I was ready for it. And then I went to the square dance there, and we got acquainted, and got married in 1981.
So after you and Bonnie divorced in about 2002, you met Mickey.
Yes, she had came in from the Valley, San Fernando Valley, and she had taken a couple of lessons out at the Square Dance Club out there, and her friend told her about the other place that they called it the Heels and Souls Square Dance Club because they started in a church. And I went in. I was an angel at that time. I was an angel for years, someone who shows them how to do it and dances with the beginner girls. And I saw that cute chick sitting over there, so I invited her to dance, and we did. And after the class was over, it was a custom to go across the street to a coffee shop for what we called an after party. And oddly enough, Mickey turned out sitting next to me, and the conversation drifted to tree drip lines. She knew about tree drip lines, and I thought, well, anybody that knows about that must be worth knowing. So I danced with quite a bit after that, and decided to get married. We married in 2005, and well, one other thing, we kind of drifted apart for a while, and she had told me about the great plays they had at UCLA Theater. So I picked up another lady and took her to square dance class and invited her to go to the play. So we were sitting there, and again, as fate would have it, Mickey came in and sat 2 rows behind us. I didn't know she was there. Anyway, I kind of put my arm around the girl, and she thought, I've got to do something about that. So she did. Shortly after that, she said, "I want to come and visit you." And I said, "Well, I don't know if we want to do that." "Yeah, I want to come down." "All right." So she brought a bottle of Mums, and we had a couple of drinks, and we were all back together at that point. She invited me to see her family in Nags Head, North Carolina. That was part of the reason for her coming and inviting me to go. And we, as I say, got married in 2005. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2007, and she declined slowly but steadily. As I like to say, she reached the end of her rope and slipped off. Her daughters took her to near Modesto, and put her in a nursing home, and faithfully went to see her every day, gave her great care, although her quality of life is quite poor. We did do some Skype, talking to her. She enjoyed that, apparently. I think she knew who I was. And also sang her some songs.
And when Mickey slipped off her rope was just recently,
June 26th of this year,
just last month.
last month.
I'm sorry for your loss, Jim.
Huh.
What message would you leave for future generations?
Well, I think that I would say what Mickey told her kids. She was raised as a Catholic, taught catechism in high school and all, but she hadn't been to church in years. Well, I guess they call it Mass. Anyway, she said, her 3 children, now, I don't want to insist on you go to any church thing, but I do want you to be kind. Thoughtful and kind and nice people. I guess that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Thank you very much for
You're welcome.
allowing us to interview you.
Certainly. Thanks for coming.
So how do you feel the military influenced or affected your life after the military? Do you feel you learned anything in the military that was very useful?
Well, I learned to go to the office and come home. That's about all I did. No, it was not very useful to me. It was not a life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
It did, however, provide the GI Bill so I could get my degree that was useful. Thank goodness for that.
Thank you for your service, sir.
You're welcome.
You signed away a couple of years of your life, and it counts.
I guess.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Thank